Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Vicky. Today I'm going to show you how to make a steampunky wall hanger. I thought it turned out pretty nice. Enjoy. First, I started off with four different sized pieces of wood, just small pieces. You could also use the flat squares or rectangles you can buy at the craft stores. These were all about either 1x1s or 1x2s and maybe 3 or 4 inches long. And I sanded them first with a heavier grit and then with a finer grit. And there's the list of materials for everything I think you'll need to make something similar. Another thing that I did that I did not film was cut out a whole bunch of different steampunk inspired shapes. You can see the gray cardstock at the top of the screen. I cut out some gears, some lattice looking shapes, some skulls, some moons and stars, just a bunch of different shapes that I thought were pretty steampunky. I cut them out on my Cricut, but you could also use stickers, or really you can just use random shapes too. So if you wanted to, you could cut out anything really to make the shapes. Next thing I did was line everything up. As you can see, I'm not really doing them in any particular order, just what looked good to me. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, as you can see, I have some popsicle sticks or the craft sticks. And this is what I'm going to use to connect them. So I'm just taking some of the flatter popsicle sticks from a box of them and figuring out how close or how far away they need to be. So I'm not, I think about this and I'm not 100% sure how strong this is going to be, because I'm just going to hot glue it on, but hopefully this will be strong enough because the pieces of wood aren't very heavy. So I also took a piece of leather cord and cut a piece of that, and that's going to be the hanger. So I'm going to hot glue that as well. So then I just did a reasonable amount of hot glue on each popsicle stick, and I tried to make sure that I didn't get any that went over the edge that you could see you'd be able to see from the front. One thing I will note is I made them different widths as well for the hangers, as well as the different sizes of the pieces of wood, so it's pretty random. But of course, you could make these a lot more uniform and put the popsicle sticks in line with each other so they look like they were one big attachment from the front. So for the leather cord, I put the hot glue down on the wood first, and then placed it, sort of smushed it into it. Again, I'm not sure how strong this will be. Hopefully it will be strong enough. I know eventually hot glue sort of loses its stick, but hopefully it'll last for at least a couple years without any problems. And then I could always re-glue it later. And then the next thing I did was I just added more hot glue around all of the joints. So I did it on the leather cord and I did it on the popsicle sticks, just to make sure that nothing falls off the wall. So once the hot glue hardened up and it seemed like it was fairly stable, the next step is to take some Mod Podge and start gluing on the shapes. So I separated out, I had my shapes in a great big pile, and now I've separated them out, as you can see at the top there. And then I'm just going to put a small amount of Mod Podge on each piece of wood. I have found, like I've done this technique on a couple other signs since I did this, and it's actually a lot easier to put a thicker coat of Mod Podge on, but I did not know that at this time, so I put a very thin coat. Basically, you want the pieces of paper to stick really well without having to poke at them. Otherwise, all these little pieces, especially on some of these finer details, it's hard to get them to stay glued down because, you know, you get a little glue on your fingers, it sticks to your fingers, everything starts rolling up. I mean, I'm going to paint over these, so it doesn't really matter what color cardstock you use or how much glue you use. So it's better to get them to stick nice the first time. And I just added a few pieces onto each of the pieces of wood. Really just whatever I felt like would look interesting. I mean, the other thing is you're not going to get all the details of these pieces, so it doesn't really matter what kind of shapes you have. I use steampunky sort of shapes, but you could use really anything that would look pretty. Flowers, butterflies, if you wanted something, a particular theme. So once I had pieces on all of the pieces of wood, I decided that it would actually look kind of cool if I added sort of a second layer to in some of the spots. So I went in and added more of the Mod Podge and more of the pieces of paper so I could get multi-layered effects. After doing the top, I decided I also wanted some on the side. Since these are thicker pieces of wood and it is going to be hanging on the wall, I thought it would look kind of cool if you could see some of this same effect on the side. Now this particular piece of paper, as you can see, it's a little bigger than the piece of wood, and I thought it might look kind of cool folded over some of the edges. And then I just went back and made sure that all of the little pieces of paper were stuck thoroughly, so that when I painted it, they don't come up. So the first layer of paint is just black, a flat black acrylic paint. It's the Apple Barrel Black. And I just did a coat of this. And the nice thing about doing it on the Mod Podge is the Mod Podge ends up being sort of like a primer, so you get a pretty good coat with just one coat. But I did the whole thing, the front and the back, using the black. And one tip is these little painter stands. My husband calls them crickets when he made some bigger ones. But they let you turn your piece upside down without waiting for the paint to dry. So as long as you have a surface that you don't care if there's a tiny little tip of that triangle poking into it. Obviously, if you're doing something that you want to have all the sides look nice, you can't use them. But if you have a back that's not going to be seen, these are great. And they let you paint without having to wait for both sides to dry. One tip is to check the paint job from all the angles to make sure that you've gotten paint on every surface, because with the paper sticking up a little bit, sometimes you can miss a little spot, and then when you go back to do the next layer, it doesn't always look good. Once that layer of black paint was completely dry, I came in and did what is kind of the fun part, I think, of this. I took some metallic paint that I have, my favorite Rust-Oleum metallic paint. So I have silver, copper, and gold. And I also had some glitter paste that I'll talk about a little more when I get to that part. But I just took the weeest bit of silver, and first I tried it on the sides to see how much I really wanted to put on the given surface. But I love the silver, so I do tend to do a lot of silver. And I took this, I don't know if it's a chip brush or a very rough sort of brush, and just got a tiny bit of the paint on there. And as you can see, I'm just brushing a little bit on it so it looks sort of like an really old-timey sort of thing. I'm also doing I don't know what to call those, the in-between parts that are holding it together, the frame parts in silver. So next I'm going to do the copper color. And I didn't even really clean the silver off. I just made sure it wasn't wet so I didn't get it mixed into the copper on the lid there. Now, a lot of times when I use this metallic paint, I actually use a rag, and it does do a very similar sort of thing, and you don't get any brush strokes with it. But I thought I would try this very rough chip on, dry brushing sort of technique to see how it looked, and I think it turned out pretty well. I'm not sure which I prefer, though, yet. But I definitely love the way the metallic paint looks on top of black paint. So I hope you like it too. And next up is the gold, so exactly the same technique as before. The last piece of wood, I'm going to use this glitter paste. I believe it's Martha Stewart. I got it at Joann Fabrics. And it's a bronze color. I'd never used it before, but I thought it might look pretty interesting. So I just tried to do the exact same thing that I did with the metallic paints and just sort of brushed it on very lightly to get... So, I mean, the main thing is to get some of the detail of the paper that you glued on to show, as you can see. And I think the glitter paste actually worked very nicely. I also have some pink that I got at the same time. It was on clearance, so I tried both colors that I'll probably use for some other similar type of project. So once that paint had dried, which doesn't take very long since it's such a very thin layer of paint, I added Mod Podge to seal it in. Especially because of the, I mean, I may or may not have done it if it had all been painted, but since I used that glitter paste, I wanted to make sure it was glued in. But it also, that makes sure you bump it, anything touches it, or if you take it off the wall and store it somewhere, you don't lose half of your detail going forward. So I put a pretty thick coat on of the I shouldn't say the non-gloss, the matte Mod Podge, just to make sure it's sealed. You could also spray it with a sealant.